After non-cooperation movement was called off in 1922, there was relative peace in the country. But India also once again would enter into the mass movement phase with the coming of the civil disobedience movement. The civil disobedience movement would be one of the biggest organized movements under Gandhi, and this started in 1930 when Gandhi gave a call for the civil disobedience movement. Now we can very well understand that all these movements have a trigger point or certain factors and causes that ultimately give a push to these movements or mass movements that have taken place during the period of struggle for Indian independence. The first cause for the civil disobedience movement to break out in 1930s was the coming of the Simon Commission. So the British constituted the Simon Commission under Sir John Simon in 1927, and Sir John Simon would come to India to establish certain clauses after he reviewed the Indian situation. Now, the Simon Commission brought out a report that was called the Black Report, and people started to protest against the coming of the Simon Commission. In order to know why, we will have to look at what the Simon Commission was establishing. So the first objective of the Simon Commission was to assess the effectiveness of the Government of India Act that was passed in 1919, as well as to suggest necessary changes for the smooth functioning of the constitutional system in India. So ideally, Simon Commission therefore aimed at better governance by the British in India. But there was a problem here, and the Indians by now, who are trained to realize and look at various policies that were being established by the British, quite very well understood that this entire report that was being prepared by the Simon Commission was in fact a whitewash, because the Indians realized the fact that the commission was window dressed, in the sense that only white men, it was an all white commission, only white men were taken into the commission, into the Simon Commission, and not one Indian was given a place in the Simon Commission. So you can understand that the Indians were angered with such sort of a commission coming to India and working for India on its behalf, when the people do not have ample representation time and again. So the people came forward to oppose this all-white commission, which was the Simon Commission, without any Indian member. So it refused to accept the demand for swaraj, and that was the second point that Simon Commission established. Simon Commission stated the very fact that not only would India not be able to self-govern, but also it would be in a vulnerable position and could not handle politics that was needed to govern itself. So the idea of Swaraj was also sort of denied by the Simon Commission, and this angered the Indian masses. You see, the Indian masses had toiled for such a long time for complete independence of India that they were not ready to bow down to anything less than Puna Swaraj. So we see that when Simon Commission came with John Simon in February, there were various leaders and freedom fighters, various institutions that came out on the streets with black flags proclaiming quote of Simon Go Back, sloganeering against the coming of the Black Commission. So it is said that when John Simon came to India on February 1928, he faced a countrywide protest. We could see a huge number of people surrounded him with black flags and sloganing Simon Go Back. As you can see in the picture, huge masses of people came to the streets and were protesting against the commission. Now, these protests against the Simon Commission were being led by popular leaders. For example, Jawaharlal Nehru was leading from Allahabad, Tanguturi Prakasam was leading from Chennai, as well, and Lala Lajpat Rai was leading from Lahore. And these leaders came together to give the entire protest movement against the Simon Commission a sort of push, so that it became a mass movement when people took to the streets to oppose this all-white commission. The British also clamped down quite quickly with its repressive measures, whether it was lathi charging or attacking with tear gas. The British brought out violent repressive measures against the Indians. So we see that the British responded with severe lathi charges, killing as well as wounding a number of people. And an eminent personality in this very movement against the Simon Commission, Lala Lajpat Rai, also was wounded during the lathi charges. And after a month, Lala Lajpat Rai succumbed to the wounds that were inflicted due to the lathi charge, and he passed away. So Lala Lajpat Rai, who was leading the protest movement against the Simon Commission in Lahore, was seriously wounded in a lathi charge in October 1928 and succumbed to his wounds and died a month after. Now, the passing away of Lala Lajpat Rai due to the repressive policies of the British angered the people not only in Punjab, Lahore, but all across the country. So we see that there were various recommendations that the Simon Commission brought forward that itself showed the fact that it was in fact a black commission. It was in fact a commission that was ideally stated or situated just to lower down the position of the Indians and give more power at the hands of the British. So the first fact was that it introduced provincial autonomy. Now, provincial autonomy would mean that the ministers of the provinces would be given more powers, and they would be responsible to the legislative assemblies. So there were more powers that were given to the British officials per se, and the legislative assemblies, which were mostly, it constituted British men, would gain more power at this position. Second was retention of special powers of the governor. Now, when we are discussing about the fact that India was being denied of Swarajya, we have to realize that Simon Commission and commissions like that of Simon Commission were repeatedly being brought to India so that more powers could be rested in the hands of British. So you can see in this very point that the special powers, whether it was regarding military or regarding various other administrative powers of the government, that was retained under the governor's wings. The third fact was that it moved ahead for a continuous presence of British officers in Indian regiments. So British officers were still to be kept in Indian regiments in order to stop any possibility of a rebellion if there occurs. So thus you can very well realize the fact as how much the revolt of 1857 had created an effect, a ripple effect almost, on the Britishers, that they still remembered to create certain protective measures for a rebellion in case there is any in the Indian regiments. Increasing the powers of the Governor General. So the Governor General of India was to be given more powers rather than the Indian political parties or the Indian ministers who were coming in front. So we see that a constant denial of the self-governance of India is something that the Simon Commission was establishing. The High Court would be under the administration of the government of India. So we see that the administrative power of the High Court, which was to be the judicial body, was also not made independent in its working. So ultimately the High Court would be managed by the government of India, which was of course a body established by the British men, and these people in the government of India would look after the judicial administrative works. So ultimately, in fact, the judicial body was not independent and could not take decisions by itself. The functions and membership of the Council of Secretary of State for India should be reduced. So the Secretary of State and the Council of the Secretary of State were institutions that was related to the Crown directly. The power of this link was to be reduced so that the government of Britain would gain more power in terms of administration and governance. So we see that the lower house of the central legislature was to be enlarged and called the Federal Assembly, and the upper house should be called the Council of State was to remain the same. So there was to be a distinction between the lower and upper house, basically decentralizing the power. The Simon Commission established its report in the face of the mass protests and the turmoil that Indians were going through at that point of time. Sir Simon did not take into consideration the position that India was in and moved ahead to publish his report of Simon Commission. As an answer to that, we see Motilal Nehru bringing out the Nehru Report. So the Nehru Report was drafted by a committee that was headed by, of course, Motilal Nehru, and drafted the Nehru Report, which was submitted on 10th of August 1928. So Motilal Nehru established and brought out the problems that the Simon Commission report had. Now this was done coming as a voice from the Congress in India. So Motilal Nehru's report, the Nehru Report, was from Congress. Now this report was again opposed by Jinnah with his 14-point program. So Jinnah's 14 points counteracted the Nehru Report. Thus we can understand that the two main parties of India, that was the Muslim League and the Indian National Congress, were still facing communal stress. Young leaders in Congress like Jawaharlal Nehru and Subhash Chandra Bose demanded for complete independence. So we see at this point of time Subhash Chandra Bose gaining prominence in Indian political scene, and Nehru and Subhash Chandra Bose did not want to dilute the situation that the Indians were in by demanding the dominion status. It was Purna Swaraj, it was complete independence or nothing for them. So the declaration of Purna Swaraj was only made with the help of a historic event. The announcement of the fact that India was now to establish full independence, complete independence for itself moving forward, was a call that was given by Gandhi. And Gandhi stated that it was only possible through the civil disobedience movement that was to take shape post that. But the historic event of the Lahore session was something that called for this Purna Swaraj. So we see the first time Purna Swaraj, or the aim of Purna Swaraj, is being declared in the Lahore session of Congress of 1929. So let's look at a clipping of this historic event of 1929.
The 45th session of the Indian National Congress met on the banks of the Ravi on the outskirts of Lahore. Motilal Nehru handed over charge of the Congress presidentship to Jawaharlal. Son followed father, and declared himself a socialist and a republican. At the stroke of midnight on December 31st, 1929, as the old year yielded place to the new, Gandhi's historic resolution on independence and the action to be taken was passed. the flag of Indian independence was unfurled amidst all over the world. To give a start to the campaign, January 26, 1930 was observed as Independence Day. The celebration gave the necessary impetus to Gandhi, convincing him that the time was ripe.
So here, when the masses were ready to move forward into a mass movement of civil disobedience, Gandhi called on for the then Viceroy Irwin and stated the fact that there were certain simple but necessary steps that the British government needed to take for India, and in case the government agreed to the points that Gandhi would state, the mass movement, the civil disobedience, would be called off by Gandhi. But the then Viceroy did not agree to that proposal, and Gandhi moved ahead and gave a call for civil disobedience movement in 1930. So we see that Gandhi proposed to Lord Irwin that if the British government accepts his simple but vital needs of India, so certain points that were required for the welfare of the nation, the civil disobedience movement would not be held. But Lord Irwin did not agree to that, and Gandhi gave a call for the movement in 1930. So the civil disobedience was mainly against the British laws and the way the British had clamped down the administrative powers and self-governance powers of the Indian masses. Now, in order to bring a important impact, significant impact on the British clauses, Gandhi decided to take a call regarding which portion he wanted to start from. So here we see the decisive factor that the civil disobedience movement was started from something which was very commonly used by every person at that point of time, even later. That was the salt laws. Now, interestingly, the British, when they came to India, they imposed in 1835 the tax on Indian salt. So the Indians were not allowed to make, that is, produce salt, not allowed to procure salt, and neither were allowed to sell salt. So the shores that would produce salt in India was not allowed to be taken by the Indians themselves. So in order to stop the Indians from procuring salt, what the British did was it taxed the collection of salt, and these taxes were imposed on a higher side. So salt, which was every common man's necessity, became an item of luxury. Imagine what a common man at that point of time would go through to procure that little amount of salt that he would need in his day-to-day life. So Gandhi decided to take that very factor up and oppose the imposed tax on Indian salt, which was passed as a series of salt laws. So Gandhi decided to start his civil disobedience movement with disobeying the tax laws imposed on salt. So while the tax increased the price of salt, making it difficult for common people to buy salt, the salt laws also prohibited Indians from collecting, producing and selling salt, thus taking away any possible source of income from them. So not only were the British clamping down upon the industries or the livelihood of the people, but the livelihood of the people who stayed near the coastal areas were also clamped down upon. So every sector, every walk of life was affected by the British laws that were coming out at that point of time. So we see that Gandhi and his followers undertook the historic event of Dandi March in order to start or mark the beginning of the civil disobedience movement. So Gandhi and his followers undertook a march, and he started this march from Sabarmati Ashram in Ahmedabad, and it ended in Dandi. So started from Sabarmati Ashram at Ahmedabad to Dandi, and this journey, which started on 12th of March 1930, ended 25 days after on 6th of April 1930. So Gandhi along with his followers went ahead and they reached to the shores of Dandi, and Gandhi picked up some salt that was on the shores, thus breaking and defying the salt laws and the salt tax that was established by the British. Thus began the civil disobedience movement, and this very event which marked the civil disobedience movement is popularly known as the Dandi March. Several such marches started to be organized by people across the country at this point of time. Now, these were not as big as the Dandi March, but these were of prolific importance. It was very similar to the one that C. Rajagopalachari organized, which was also a salt march in Tamil Nadu from Trichinopoly to Vedaranyam, and this became a mode of protest for the common people. They started to picket liquor shops, they started to burn foreign goods, break certain civil laws, not pay taxes to the British. Thus all of these became a part of the larger civil disobedience movement that Gandhi started in 1930. So can you tell me who organized a salt march in Tamil Nadu from Trichinopoly to Vedaranyam? Was it C. Rajagopalachari, Lala Lajpat Rai, Mahatma Gandhi, or Sarojini Naidu? The answer will be C. Rajagopalachari. Thus we see that as a part of the protest movement, as a part of breaking the civil laws established by the British, there were many people who left their government jobs as well as a mark of protest. So many people resigned from their government jobs and refused to pay taxes to the government as well. Here we can see how people are picketing the liquor shop peacefully, and here we see the famous bonfires, public bonfires, which were arranged to burn the British goods as in conjunction with Swadeshi. Now, this was also the point of time when we see that not only were, protests being led by men, or the common man was coming out of their houses to protest on the streets, but women leaders are coming in the forefront and participating shoulder to shoulder with men in the struggle for independence of India. This is the point of time we see women like Sarojini Naidu, Kamala Nehru, as well as Vijayalakshmi Pandit come in the forefront of these movements in the civil disobedience protests and lead the way as women freedom fighters as well. So at this point of time, when the civil disobedience movement is at its peak, Gandhi decided to again give a call to Lord Irwin, who was the then Viceroy. And Gandhi stated, the factor that if there is an establishment of the Pact where Lord Irwin decides to agree to what Gandhi says, then Gandhi will automatically call off the civil disobedience movement of 1930. So we see the signing of the Irwin Pact in 1931, which was signed between Mahatma Gandhi and Lord Irwin. Now, there were certain things that were established in this Gandhi-Irwin Pact between Mahatma Gandhi and Lord Irwin, that both the sides decided to agree to certain things. The first fact was Mahatma Gandhi would halt the civil disobedience movement, and he did halt the civil disobedience movement once the Irwin Pact was signed. The second was Congress agreed to participate in the second roundtable conference, where the first roundtable conference was boycotted by Gandhi. So the second roundtable conference, somebody as eminent as Gandhi was much needed, and therefore Irwin demanded Gandhi that he would have to come to the second roundtable conference. The third point was that the British government agreed to release all political prisoners who were not convicted of any violent cases. So Gandhi made it a point to demand the release of all the political prisoners who were taken during these protests, popular protests in the civil disobedience movement, and they were to be released without any delay. The government also agreed to return lands confiscated for non-payment of taxes. So there were several economic clampdowns and repressive measures that the British officials usually took, in fact, in cases with their laws as well. So they did confiscate land for the non-payment of taxes, which was a method of civil disobedience. Now those lands were to be given back. It was also to be noted that those who had quitted their jobs during the civil disobedience movement would be allowed to rejoin. Residents of the coastal areas were to be allowed now to make salt, so they could produce salt, and the salt laws had to be changed. Peaceful picketing of liquor and foreign goods shops would be allowed by the British government. So the British government could not take captive the people who would be picketing these shops. They would not be taken and jailed and arrested. So thus we see that these were the clauses that Irwin and Gandhi, Lord Irwin and Mahatma Gandhi agreed to, and the Gandhi-Irwin Pact was signed. Now, after the Irwin Pact, it was very obvious that the second round table was held, and Mahatma Gandhi attended the second roundtable conference. But the second roundtable conference was something that disappointed Gandhi to the core, and he came back and gave a call to restart the civil disobedience movement. So we see that as per the Gandhi-Irwin Pact, Mahatma Gandhi flew to London in September 1931 and attended the second roundtable conference as the sole representative of Congress. So Gandhi was the sole representative of Congress in the conference. However, Gandhi was disappointed. The reason being the demand for separate communal electorates became the primary point of discussion in the Congress. We see that the Sikhs, Christians, Anglo-Indians, depressed classes, Muslim League and all others were demanding for separate electorate for themselves. Now what does separate electorate mean? Let's take the example of the Northwest Frontier province. It was a Muslim majority province. So in this demand, therefore, it stated that from the Northwest Frontier province, only Muslim candidates could contest the elections, and after the elections, only a Muslim candidate could rule from there. So we see that in this conference, therefore, the matter of self-determination or the formation of a government by the Indians was not discussed at all. So when Gandhi came back, and one of the major reasons that gave a push to restart the civil disobedience was how the Viceroy Lord Wellington, the then Viceroy Lord Wellington, had started to repress the Indians and again arrest and also lathi charge and exploit the Indians at that point of time. So Lord Wellington, who was the then Viceroy, undertook a policy of repression in India, breaking the Gandhi-Irwin Pact. And the civil disobedience movement was resumed, but it finally came to an end in 1934. Now, there were several, reasons why this entire movement came to an end or an abrupt end in 1934. The basic reason being, after a point of time, civil disobedience, did not remain the main sort of nationalist movement anymore, or it lost that vigor that people were protesting with. Because after a point of time, Gandhi in fact understood that it was to be parliamentary, in the sense that they would now move to the entire idea of self-governance and ask the British to quit India right away. So it was only Purna Swaraj, or complete independence, that they were focusing on. So per se, therefore, we cannot really state that the civil disobedience movement was a failure because it came to an abrupt end. In fact, the civil disobedience movement had a very impactful significance. How we see that it was a mass struggle from a place where every person from different walks of life were present in the struggle, and there was no gender barrier as well. Now, it also created an adequate economic pressure on the British when the economic return of the British almost reduced by 50%, and that gave a big blow to the British when British products did not do well in Indian markets anymore, and the British were already under pressure from the changes that were happening in the international scene. The movement also yielded positive political results for the Congress. In the 1937 elections, the Congress had won majority of the votes, which showed that the people accepted Congress as a pan-India party which brought people from all spheres of life into the mass struggle. And it became clearer that the Congress wanted Purna Swaraj, or complete independence, for India. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit the bell icon. You can also register for free at DeltaStep.com or download the DeltaStep app to get access to all our 5,000 plus amazing videos as per your school syllabus. Master each topic with our adaptive practice technology. Get million plus questions with step-by-step solutions and unlimited mock tests. Get all your doubts resolved instantly, learn via games, and win amazing prizes like PlayStations and iPads. So at DeltaStep, learning is not just fun and easy, it is rewarding too. So register for free now.